Hey there, and welcome back to another Avatar video. And you know those times where you're just sitting around, minding your own business, and then suddenly, poof, an idea just worms its way into your head and won't get out no matter how hard you try? Yeah, today's one of those days, because, there I was just chilling, and suddenly, all I could think about was, which element is realistically the best in the Avatar world? Which is the strongest, the most useful? Which would be the handiest to survive? All that sort of stuff. And so yeah, that's pretty much what I want to talk about today. Which element is the overall best within the confines of the show itself, at least in my opinion. And so, with all that being said, I guess there's nothing else to say but to jump right into things. Okay, so in the world of Avatar The Last Airbender and The Legend of Korra, there are 4 base elements that specific characters are able to bend. There's air, water, earth, and fire. And each of these elements basically makes up a different cultural group that controls a portion of the world that the characters inhabit. There, that's the bare bones backstory. But it does nothing to even address the question, which element's best? And yeah, there's a lot of things you need to consider for this very broad question, but I feel like you have to admit that the biggest category for this ranking would be combat usefulness. After all, that's a huge part of the show. Sparring, fighting battles, and wars. Bending in this world is as much a weapon as it is a tool, and so I guess that's where we need to start. How good are these things in a fight? How do they match up? Which one's the most useful? Which is the easiest to use? Okay, so if you look at the show as your only gospel truth without looking at any context, it's pretty clear that fire reigns supreme. After all, let's just take a look at some feats. They obliterated the air nomads. They crippled the southern water tribe. They took much of the earth kingdom. Plus, they have a once-in-a-century supercharged power that essentially makes them an unstoppable force by regular fighters. So simply from that, they seem like a mostly unstoppable force of nature. So therefore, they'd have to be the best form of bending, right? Well, yeah, it ignores a lot of context. I mean, yeah, they wiped out the air nomads, but that was a concentrated surprise attack. And then it took them like 100 years to leave the southern water tribe all but vanquished, whilst huge tracts of land in the Earth Kingdom would remain free. Plus, the North Pole held firm, so suddenly, I think you can call into question their superiority in some respects. It's much clearer the Fire Nation's success largely stems from its superior planning and technology. There's a lot of wiggle room to still argue for the actual bending itself, whether it's water or earth, or honestly even air. Although, I kind of think of all the elements, air's got to be the least martially inclined. Like, yeah, I get it, flying and gliding and dodging, strong air currents, etc. They're all useful techniques, I get it, but at the same time, within the show itself, I see no evidence to show that if you're looking to be a warrior, that air would be the element you want to use. I mean, there's no shame in it, it's still a strong weapon, and it does give you a lot of various different abilities and advantages, but I just don't see it being quite as versatile as any of the others. I mean, look, in terms of fighting, Earth is ridiculously overpowered. I feel like in the show it looks underpowered for what it should be. I mean, most of the world's covered with Earth. There's potential for metal bending, the potential for lava bending. It can block basically every other type of bending quite easily, and also on its own is just pretty damn strong. I don't think many people can just shrug off a boulder hitting you full pelt. Fire, well, fire's just strong. We've seen that it and air often seem to cancel each other out when in battle, plus lightning's basically unblockable except by other firebenders, or if you hide behind something. And you also get that once in 100 years steroid boost to make yourself seem like a real beast for the day. The only problem is, solar eclipses, well, you're well and truly screwed then, but they are rare. And hey, much like air, you only have to rely on yourself. You're the one making the fire after all. Earth, you still need earth. But, rarely is there not earth around, in my experience. Water, that's one that's very powerful. But at the same time, in a lot of situations, there's not going to be a heap of water on hand. So in that respect, despite it being strong and versatile, it can also be quite limited, unless you can bloodbend. But once again, the show makes it clear that that's one of the rarest abilities in the entire franchise, so it's hard to factor that in as a consistent strength. Plus, for most people, I think you can only do it at the full moon, right? That's when you get the power, so it doesn't even seem very reliable to me. But yeah, back to normal water bending, you also have to ensure that you have water at all times for fighting, just in case. So you pretty much have to carry around a keg on your back just to be able to compete with everybody else. But then again, on the other hand, with water, you're the only type of bender that's able to heal yourself and your allies. But once again, not really sure how much use an ability like that's going to be in the middle of a fight. Seems like a sort of post-battle sort of thing. So I guess you could probably rule that out as a contributing factor as well, honestly. So, I really feel like the contest can come down to fire versus earth. And honestly, even then, I feel like even though fire can be produced out of nowhere, earth just has the best versatility by far. After Toph comes around, metal bending seems to be reasonably common, even if it's still a niche skill. And whilst lightning is obviously a threat, you can block that with a regular earth wall as well. We see this. Ultimately, it just seems like Earth is the strongest over a widest variety of possible battle zones, and whilst in the show the Earth Kingdom is losing the war overall, they still managed to hold back the tide for 100 years, despite having a puppet ruler, and a massively decentralized and disorganized army with various different groups kind of just doing their own thing, whilst the Fire Nation is a massively well-oiled machine under one man. And thus, they're able to achieve quite a lot of success despite there being far more Earth warriors to fight. On top of that, in my experience, Earth is a very, very, very good counter to fire because, dirt doesn't burn very well. And so, whilst you might disagree, these are just my thoughts on it. It seems like both a perfect defense and a powerful offense. But I don't think that combat is the be-all and end-all of the question either, right? Because, there's more to life than fighting. This is one of the big messages of the show itself, that violence is not always the answer, that there's more to life than war. And indeed, I think there are also elements of each bending element to examine before you can make the blanket statement of which element's best. I mean, surely water and air would probably have to be the best for recreational use. I don't really think I need to explain why that would be. And I think fire and earth probably have a few more practical uses. I mean, fire's fire, and fire's useful, but also relatively straightforward for people to make without bending, which I think limits its utility. I mean, if you can already make fire with, a match, why would you not want to be able to bend something else? I think firebending's real strength is lightning, which would be useful for a pre-industrial era kickstarting their electrical endeavors, as we actually see in the show. But even then, you wouldn't want to have a firebender as your human battery. They can't keep it up forever. It's not realistic. But earthbending, on the other hand, mining, building, landscaping, using both earth and metal, that's already pretty good. But then, on the other hand, there's waterbending, crops and farming, flood relief. Somehow using water as a cure-all for minor injuries and illnesses. That alone pushes water to the top of my list for non-combat related bending. It's basically super medicine. I don't understand how, but it is. And so water's first in this category, with earth in second place. And so, since water kind of ranked poorly for me as a fighting element, if you look at it just as a pure usability factor in a world that these characters inhabit, I feel like earthbending takes this quite easily. It just seems like the best ability to have. And maybe you think I'm wrong. But I guess all I can say is that these have been my opinions, and now I'd like to hear yours. Which element do you think's best, and why? Do you agree with me, or maybe not? I'm curious for your thoughts, so make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know.